Check, check.
Check, check.
Guess what? You're listening to Mouth Dancing with your host, Young. Thanks again for tuning in. Let's just get right to it, okay? This week I wanted to talk about ghosts to kick it off. You ever think about ghosts? There's a lot of talk about whether people believe they even exist, right? Well, that's not really the point that I want to get to this time. It's not really what I want to discuss. I want to discuss some of the, technicalities about ghosts, or, the logic behind them. You ever notice that in, TV shows or books or movies, ghosts usually have clothing on? And I was thinking about this the other day. Does it even really make sense that they have clothing on? They're spirits, right? So would the clothes they were wearing become supernatural too when they died? Or how does that work? I don't understand how clothing could be a ghost or a spirit. I can understand how the person themselves maybe could be a spirit, but I don't understand how physical things that, from their life would become part of their ghost or whatever, their spirit. Does clothing have a soul? And why are they wearing the same clothes that they had in the air they died in? I mean, if clothing is supernatural, couldn't they update their wardrobe? So maybe you could see a ghost of someone who died in, the 1800s, and instead of wearing some sort of, Civil War outfit, they could be just wearing, regular clothes like people wear nowadays, like sweatpants and a t-shirt and a hat and some sneakers. So you wouldn't know, when they died. I'm Jebediah, and I passed away in 1823. You say, hey, Jebediah, why are you wearing Jordans? I don't understand that. And he would say, well, I can wear whatever clothing I want to. Doesn't have to be from my lifetime. Yeah, why? I always think of someone named Jebediah for some reason too. Maybe it's from The Simpsons. Just some, I don't know, some guy from the 1800s, an American guy, is probably named Jebediah for some reason. Or Jeremiah, maybe. But then you wonder, I guess every part of them becomes a spirit, right? Technically a ghost is the person's soul, right? Should their body even be there? Seems like it should just be some sort of blob-looking spirit thing that's floating in the sky, and it's not really shaped like a person. Or maybe their spirit is formless, right? And it could take on sort of any shape it wants to. I think there are ghosts like that who transform, depending on what they want to look like. Maybe they want to look like the person they were when they died, or when they were alive, and they want to sometimes look like, I don't know, like that cartoon ghost that's kind of like a white sheet floating around. Yeah, there's a lot of things about ghosts that don't really quite make sense to me. But if there's some sort of magical explanation behind it all, I'd like to hear about it. Someone explain this to me, the ghosts in their clothing thing. Did they have a favorite outfit that they like to wear, so when their ghost haunts you, it's wearing that same outfit? The other day I was wearing shorts for the first time in a long time because it's been pretty cold this year in Seattle. It's been sort of like a never-ending winter. We haven't really had a spring so far, but it was kind of warm the other day and I was wearing shorts. And I was peeing right into our toilet. And, my legs were bare, so I felt some of the splashback from the pee. And it made me think, so this is how much pee is splashing out all the time, right? Except I don't notice it because I'm wearing pants and it just hits my pants. And I thought, that's pretty nasty. And I bet that happens to like pretty much every guy, unless he sits down to pee in the toilet. I've heard some people do that, like in Japan. Some of the guys do that just because it's cleaner and there's less splashing. I don't know, maybe it's not actually a bad idea considering how much pee splashes out. So like, every guy you see outside, he's probably got some pee splash on his clothing, on his pants somewhere. Unless he can miraculously pee every time standing up without having any splashback. I think that's virtually impossible though. It just comes out, it hits things and it bounces, or maybe the stream is not perfectly straight and there's just sort of some spray involved. Because pee can be pretty powerful, especially if you've got a really full bladder. It can be like a mini hose, and there's just like urine splashing everywhere. So if you live in like a crowded city where you ride public transportation a lot, and you're kind of, rubbing elbows with people on the bus or the train, probably like swapping pee with each other to some degree. That's kind of disgusting, isn't it? I know people say pee is like sterile or whatever. It's not a big deal. You can like drink it or whatever, or you can use it to clean things. But, I don't really care how sterile it is, or I don't know if it's quite sterile, but they say it's not full of like bacteria like poop is. I don't think you can get diseases from someone's pee. I'm not sure, but it's still kind of nasty, right? Sweat's technically, it's not really something you could spread diseases with either, but I still don't want someone's sweat on me, right? I don't think you do either. So the whole pee thing, it's probably not something you really consider, but there's just pee everywhere. And, just considering the fact that also a lot of people don't even wash their hands after they use the bathroom. If you've ever been in a public restroom, I'm sure you've seen this. People just walk straight out after they pee. Even after they shit, I've seen that. I've seen a guy, getting out of the toilet in a public restroom where he just took a shit and he just walked straight out the door. He didn't wash his hands. He didn't even think about stopping to wash his hands. He just walked straight out of the bathroom. It's pretty disgusting. There's already like poo germs everywhere from people like that. But add to that pee, there's just pee everywhere if you think about it. Maybe it's just something we gotta live with. I don't think it's ever gonna go away. Doesn't really seem to be doing that much harm. But it's just kind of a nasty thought. Am I right? Yeah, I think so. Finally, I wanted to talk about the way humans look at animals, right? Like, we seem to define them in terms of how they're different from us a lot of times. Like, you say an invertebrate, right? Something without a spine. But do invertebrates think things with spines are kind of weird? Like, oh, that's one of those vertebrates. It's got a spine. Those guys are kind of weird. They need a spine to, like, stand up or have some sort of form. They don't have an exoskeleton or whatever like me. Or do octopuses think of humans as, like, tentacle-less freaks? Like, those guys don't even have tentacles on their limbs. Kind of weird, isn't it? They're just sort of smooth and, they barely got any hair on their bodies. And, well, octopuses are pretty smooth, actually. They probably think we're freaks for having hair. Like, oh, those guys aren't even very well adapted to the water. They got all that stupid hair on their body. It's kind of weird how humans have hair on our heads and just like certain areas like our pubic area or like our armpits, and everywhere else it's pretty thin usually. But most animals, they have hair like covering their entire bodies. It's kind of weird that humans just have patches of hair like eyebrows or like nose hair or ear hair. But then everywhere else we seem to have gotten rid of most of the hair on our bodies. Why did our bodies decide to just keep it like in certain weird spots? So we could like be able to part our hair in the middle or the side or spike it or whatever, or do some sort of a fade. I guess hairstyles were really important in human evolution, right? Bowl cuts, those are pretty classic. I think that must have been really important for our evolution, is like being able to have a bowl cut. Because every kid has a bowl cut probably at some point, right? Probably got at least one school picture where with that hairdo. But yeah, we kind of see ourselves as the center of the universe, right? And we see everything, we define things in terms of how they're different from us a lot of times. But that's pretty short-sighted, isn't it? Because humans have been around, modern humans, or anatomically modern humans, the people that we are now, we've been around for like about 250,000 years. But, the planet and all the life on it has been around for way longer than that, like billions of years, right? So far we're just a flash in the pan. I mean, I don't know how long we're going to be around. Some people say we're going to go extinct pretty soon. I don't know, I'm not as much of a doomer as those people. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. Maybe like a lot of us will die off at some point, but then small groups of us will survive on the planet. But yeah, it's weird how self-centered humans are, right? We just see everything about the world through a human lens. And even within our species, there are certain biases like racial or cultural or political or social, right? And we see another race in terms of how they're different from ourselves. I don't think... do other animals do that as much as humans? Probably not. They're probably not as narcissistic, right? That seems to be one of our most defining traits, is our self-centeredness and narcissism. That's why we got social media. That's why we got Instagram, and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok. So we can broadcast ourselves. That's what the social media is all about, right? Back in the amoeba days, when everything was like a single-celled organism, they didn't need social media. Their social media was just like the ooze and the mud they lived in. And they would just slither around and wiggle and swim around. And then maybe once in a while come in contact with each other and say hi. And that was pretty much, Instagram right there. They didn't have to have a special gadget. But they still had a lot of fun too. Even before the days of the internet and social media and smartphones, people still, found ways to have a good time. And, if even an amoeba can do it, or a caveman, caveman had a pretty good time too. They would, hunt and gather together, and then they would eat their food together and, sitting around the fire and grunting at each other. That was social media back then. I think we could all use a little more of that kind of social media, if you know what I mean. So that's what I'm going to encourage all of you to do out there, is get some old school social media in your lives. Sitting around the fire, swinging around in the primordial ooze, hanging around outside with your friends and just, playing and chatting. That's the best kind of social media, right? I don't hate all social media. I think there are some benefits to it. But too much of it is definitely not good. I think it warps your mind. It's kind of like an addiction, it's kind of like an addiction, like almost like a gambling addiction or something. I think it warps your mind to the point where you're just focused on that one thing. So you gotta have small doses of it. Anyway, that's the note I'd like to end on. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.